for the first piece, you know, any sort of alternative to whether or not you're going to build your own facility or outsource, I'd say maybe the third alternative there is a partnership of some sort with, you know, some sort of biopharma company that already has the internal capacity. I had mentioned earlier around even smaller players who decided to build out facilities that, you know, again, maybe they underestimated the overhead that it would cost or different strategic changes there, where, you know, maybe that's an opportunity for a partnership, you know, with your own company to utilize some of that capacity. So I could see that as a third option. You know, and to answer the second part of the question around, you know, outsourcing to India or China from, you know, a cell and gene perspective, I think right now there already are so many hurdles, even with just trying to get, you know, robust manufacturing on track, even within, you know, a well-developed country like the United States, that I think that it would still be too premature to really move your drug substance and drug product processes over to India and China. I think even through, you know, the days of small molecule, folks have initially, if we could even go back to that slide, it was the second slide that kind of just shows how capacity had increased, and you can kind of, you know, tie that back to the economy in 2008 and 2010. And, you know, Lewis had mentioned the massive amount of outsourcing that went to India and China. That ended up, I think, from my days in small molecule, actually potentially becoming a lot more expensive for you if you weren't able to, you know, have robust controls and manage that properly. So, long story short, I don't think in the near term it's really a directly viable option. I'm sure folks are going to be looking at it from a cost of goods and manufacture perspective and are already starting to model it. But from a maturity standpoint, I don't think it's quite there yet.
Hey, Lewis, do you
Yeah,
mind
I'd
if
like to pile on with Joe there if possible and say I totally agree with that. And I think there's another factor here. The U.S. government has significantly increased lots of funding for folks who are onshoring, and essentially they're going to require most, if not all, of the manufacturing, including it, at least in my experience recently, they're looking for even raw materials as much as possible to come from the U.S. So that's going to put some pressure on bringing things back to the U.S., onshoring, as well as some of the organizations just starting out now are going to look at that nice funding from the NIH and the DoD and DARPA, as well as the president's presidential order, and say, wow, you know, we could potentially get some of that funding for what we're doing right now, but understanding those constraints of, you know, the desire to keep it within the U.S.
Okay, very good.
Lewis, do you mind if I contribute as well?
Please do.
So I actually want to talk about both the other alternative models as well as India, China. I'll start with the China bit, actually, right? So I do think that there's a lot of geopolitical factors to consider when going to China. And the potential, right, that the U.S. government may instill policies if there's aggression from China into Taiwan that would make it very difficult to continue working and kind of have a surety of supply going forward. So I think that will weigh heavily. And again, I think that's specific to China and not necessarily to India.